Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Joyner. I'm founder and president at the Village Square. On behalf of the Village Square and Florida Humanities, we're delighted you've joined us tonight for Frenemies. Bernie and Geston both love their country. This program is made possible by funding for Florida Humanities through the National Endowment for the Humanities. It's part of a multi-year series of digital programs, Unum, Democracy Reignited, presented in partnership with Florida Humanities, exploring the past, present, and future of the American idea as it exists on paper, in the hearts of our people, and as it manifests in our lives. Particularly important with tonight's guests, any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Florida Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities. If you are not familiar with the work of NEH and Florida Humanities, we're putting their web addresses in chat. Be sure to check them out. That includes our next program on October 15th with the well-known Wait But Why blogger Tim Urban on his book, What's Our Problem? Self-Help for Societies. The chat window will be closed tonight, but you can ask questions at any time during the program by clicking on the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. And feel free to just go ahead and start sending in the questions right away. If you haven't taken our pre-event survey yet, if you'll take just a moment to do so now, we're dropping the link in the chat thread. If you're on Facebook Live, you won't be able to see it. Don't worry about it. Your honest and anonymous answers will help the Village Square with a major nationally scoped research effort to better understand divisions in the United States. Even if you've done the survey for another program, we'd ask that you do it again this time. We are delighted to welcome streaming partners, Bridge USA, USC Center for the Political Future, National Institute for Civil Discourse, Listen First Project, Common Ground Committee, Braver Angels, Civic Health Project, McCourtney Institute for Democracy, Unify, Talking Politics, Religion Without Killing Each Other, Citizen Connect, Center for the Humanities at the University of Miami, Network for Responsible Public Policy, and our wonderful long-term partners, the Tallahassee Democrat and WFSU Public Media. We invite you to check out all these organizations. They're doing extraordinary work. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's special guest, two of my favorite humans from all 18 years of our work at the Village Square. This pair has gone to college campuses as a part of our Respect and Rebellion series. They've been to schools ranging from BYU to Berkeley. They're one of our most in-demand pairs. And tonight we are bringing you, drum roll, two Florida men. Geston Pierre is the pastor of New Life Church and a real-life recording artist. Geston is a Florida native, leader, ideator, pastor, aspiring public servant, Democrat, traveler, foodie, salmon snob, and jokester. Berny Jacques is an attorney by profession and a member of the Florida House of Representatives, District 59. Bernie is a Haiti native, practicing lawyer, elected state rep, staunch Republican, Florida lover, community leader, aspiring Ralph Lauren polo model, decent golfer, thinker, and talker. Gentlemen, what a joy it is to be with you here tonight.
It's a privilege to be here, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Yeah, great to be on.
So I have got two recent news headlines I wanted to share with you from the great state of Florida. The first one is Florida man tries to get alligator drunk, gets bitten. And the second is Florida man arrested while crossing Atlantic Ocean in a hamster wheel. So my first question to you tonight is, did either one of those stories involve either of you? Tell the truth. I won't tell anyone else.
No, but I probably have come close to one of those.
Can you tell us which one?
I'll leave it there.
Good call, Bernie.
So we are Florida men, but we are not Florida man. So there's a difference.
Yeah, you know what? I think there is. That was good. I didn't even give you any warning about that, so that was a good answer. So I'm leaving the real introductions for this evening for Bernie and Geston to do for each other. But after I start with a poll about what Americans think about the angry political environment and about each other. So if we can throw that poll up for a second. And And here it goes. Okay. So go ahead and answer the poll questions. There, it's anonymous and everything. Um, I'll let you read through them and give you just a second. We could entertain them, Bernie and Geston, with other memorable Florida man stories, although you have to keep in mind that this is a PG rated. When I was trying to find examples, actually, I had a really hard time finding them that I could use because so many of them are just wrong.
Yeah. The craziest things happen in Florida. And so I can't think of many Florida man incidents that are PG rated.
Seems like it. Seems like it.
Even,
Somebody finally suggested a reason for Florida man because I tried to try it out with different states. And they suggested that the reason for that is that a lot of people end up living in Florida, first came here on spring break. And so we're the kind of state that appeals to people who think, wow, I want to do more of that. You think?
That could be.
or maybe it's the humidity that affects our behavior. I don't know.
All right. Let's see. Looking to see how many respondents we've got. And almost just one more second, and then we'll go ahead and close it up. I'll count down 10, 9, 8, 7.
Somebody's gonna win $100.
Yes, but not for answering the poll.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Go ahead and end the poll, Cassie, and share the results. And so I'm going to go ahead and actually pop up. I've got I'm going to share my screen here so that you all can see the results. Share my screen. Okay. So I'm going to take that away. Can everybody see the results there? So, the actual numbers here are people who support harassing members of the other party online is just 5% of Democrats and 6% of Republicans. Very, 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 very low, small. Who support using violence against peaceful protests by the other party. Again, teeny tiny. Like if we were to ask some other incredibly insane question, we'd probably get more people. How many of you have been struck by lightning? We'd probably get more people. Um, and actually, it's funny, I'm looking at the results and I think that's what we sort of predicted that we'd sort of be in there at those numbers. We tend to overestimate it. Support censoring media sources that attack their party, 6% and 12% is probably not that surprising. That for Republicans is a little higher. I mean, maybe Bernie, you can even say a word about that when you guys get rolling. And support violence if the other party wins the election, 4 and 6%. Again, teeny tiny. And you know, it's not just that Americans think that, it's that Americans really, it's what we do too. And while some Democrats and some Republicans might be violent, and obviously we have incredibly tragic proof of that too often, and recently, the vast, vast majorities of Americans, the vast majorities, abhor violence and want to settle differences peacefully. And then, you know, also we really believe in and want to talk about our differences and you know, talk about our differences like we're doing here tonight. Bernie and Justin, any thoughts about the poll? Does it surprise you, the actual results?
No, actually, and it's mostly aspirational. I would always have hope that would be the result of a poll like this, right? Because you just think maybe it's just a very loud and angry minority of folks that do the ugly things. And so the poll actually, confirmed that. And it's reassuring, right? Because sometimes it may not be so reassuring when you see what's occurring currently in the public square and the noise and everything. But in my heart of hearts, I know Americans would come down the way they did on the poll.
Yeah,
Agreed. I think sometimes the negative things that happen get all the publicity, but the reality does not. And the reality is most of us want our country to thrive and do well, and we desire to work together, even if it's not the way we would like things to go. We desire the greater good of our country.
And it's just a human thing to magnify the negative, right? It just kind of gets bigger and bigger in your brain than it really is. And then part of the vicious cycle is that then we behave differently as if we're under greater threat than we are, from our fellow Americans. Anyway, it's funny because, and I'm going to jump off and give it to you all, but one of the reasons that we send speaker pairs that we had the idea to begin with onto campus is sort of for the same reason as with every panel we ever have, we ask our panelists who disagree with each other to be a team and to have each other's backs. And if somebody on your side of a division, a difficult division, and we've had all the conversations on all the topics, if they're being given a hard time by somebody in the audience, to have their back, it's amazing how well people do it. The panels always rise to the occasion, and it changes everything. With you all going onto campus with each other, it's just natural, right? It's like when people can see that you're friends and that you respect each other, it changes everything. All right, over to you, and I'll join you again when we've got some questions.
All right. Well, Bernie, go ahead and tell them about me before I tell them about you, and we'll get it popping.
All right, let's do it. So my good friend Geston here is a Florida native. And even though he moved away in his adult life, his heart is still here in Florida. He currently serves as the pastor of 2 churches in Virginia and is the husband of 1 wife, father of 1 daughter, and of course, a lifelong Democrat. Geston is what you would call like a silent killer, right? He's a man of few words, but also has great depth and substance. As a musician, minister, and mentor, Geston has always been a man of many interests and talents. So his various successes, from the music industry to faith-based leadership, comes as no surprise to me. He is an all-around nice guy with a good sense of humor.
Oh, that was nice of you to say, my friend. Bernie was Haiti-born and Florida-bred. He moved to Florida when he was young, and that's where I met him. But through his adult life, he has been privileged to serve as an assistant, I believe, prosecutor and nonprofit executive for the Boys and Girls Club, where he currently serves in Tampa, Florida. And he also has the distinguished pleasure and privilege of serving as the House of Representatives District of 59 in Florida. He's a staunch Republican. He loves the Polo brand. He's a community leader, and he's one of the smartest men I've ever met. I remember back in high school, we had a heated argument, and I just knew he was going to be a politician. He told me back in high school that he will be the governor of Florida. I believed him then, and I still believe him now. He's a great leader, and I'm proud of his accomplishments. And so that's a little bit about us, but we want to talk about freedom of speech. That First Amendment. So, Bernie, what's your take on freedom of speech?
Well, freedom of speech is essential. I mean, it's the reason why it's part of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, right? The founders knew that this would be a very important right to preserve, a right that comes from our Creator, and government is simply there to protect it. And if you look at the way this country was founded, it's because, a lot of patriots wanted to make sure their voice was heard. And they knew that it was so important, right? Because they had their different, press outlets and so forth, getting the word out for the movement, for the revolutionary movement. But I think they also realized that if you allow for robust conversation and the free exchange of ideas, it will avoid what ended up being, a hot war, a revolution type situation. So using our words is a great way to foster the exchange of ideas, to express dissent when you don't agree with what your government is doing, with what the powers that be are doing. So it doesn't get to the level where it's we're going at it in a violent way. And so I truly believe in that freedom, and I hope it continues to be upheld. by every facet of our society.
Yeah. What's your take on cancel culture?
Well, I think cancel culture is completely contrary to what I just described, right? It's completely anti-American because the whole purpose of the First Amendment is not only just that, and freedom of speech is to be able to share your ideas, but it becomes even more important when those ideas are not popular, right? When they go counter to the prevailing thoughts and beliefs, right? So that's why it's so protected, right? If it were, if anybody would be cool with it, there wouldn't need to be a protection. So when you can cancel somebody just because they hold a different viewpoint or they have a viewpoint that is not part of the mainstream, I think it's totally counter to what our founders intended in our Constitution and the Bill of Rights uh, as expressed in the First Amendment. And so it's wrong, and so we have to cancel culture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was so excited I got ahead of myself. Um, we're gonna jump back to our origin stories and how you and I came to the different perspectives that we have. So I'll start by sharing mine. So I was born in Florida. I grew up in a Haitian household. Both of my parents come from Haiti. And in the 1980s, about 40,000 Haitian immigrants migrated to America in search of a better life. And my parents were one of those people. My mother flew to America. My father took a boat. It was a risky and dangerous journey. And they actually met here in America many years later and got married and had my sister and I. But they were faith-filled parents who instilled in my siblings God, family, education, treating others with respect. So those foundational values I grew up with. They sacrificed so my sister and I could go to the best schools and to have opportunities that they could not have. I graduated from an HBCU in Alabama with a bachelor's in religion. I then moved to Michigan to pursue a master's of divinity, to study to become a minister. I took a hiatus to compete on a reality TV show called The Sing Off on NBC. And then I began to tour the world and travel before I returned to pastoring in 2013. So I returned to my home state in Florida, began pastoring, and unfortunately, the congregation where I was serving was not ready to receive a chocolate man as their pastor. And I had lots of issues and challenges, but I did my best to serve. And ultimately, when I was sharing about some of the things that were happening in society about race relations, that led many in the congregation to become so mad at me that they actually ended up putting me out of the church. And I found out that, listen, my time was up. I had to pack and leave. So I ended up going to California, Oakland, California, to continue to serve and lead there. And I ended up back on the East Coast in New Jersey. And now I currently pastor in Virginia as the pastor of two churches. And so I'm passionate about social justice and how America has treated people systemically and how it continues to respond to immigrants and other people. And I'm also passionate about empowering others to leverage their influence to make a difference, regardless of their background, socioeconomic status, whatever labels we can place on them. I want to empower other people to be the person that God created them to be. And so that's how I came to my liberal leaning. And so, Bernie, can you share your perspective, your upbringing, and how you grew into conservatism?
Absolutely. So, as it was mentioned in the introduction, my family and I, we came to this country, from Haiti. My family fleeing political persecution in the early '90s, and when we settled here in Florida, I literally had the fortune of having a front row seat to the American dream. And what I mean by that is, when we first came, My parents immediately instilled in my brothers and I that in this country, if you work hard, you play by the rules, and most importantly, have faith in God, all things are possible. And I saw that example, and they lived it out. And these are folks that came here expecting nothing for free and accepting nothing for free. They immediately got to work, working multiple jobs each in places like the packing houses of Immokalee, Florida, convenience stores, grocery stores, fast food chains, you name it. And eventually they would save up little by little. And I would see the progression as a young kid from living with my uncle. Now we would live with my uncle and my aunt and cousin. And then from there, we moved to our own home. It was a mobile home, a trailer. Nothing glamorous about it, but it was our own. And so even as a kid, I could see that that was a progression. The thing didn't even have air conditioning, as I recall. And from there, we went on to live in an apartment in Immokalee, Florida. Again, nothing glamorous, but at least, there was working air conditioning. And then from there to a duplex in East Naples. And then my parents eventually bought their first home, the same home where they live today. And all that happened within 6 years of coming into the country, right? So it just goes to show you that this is truly an exceptional place. This is truly the land of freedom and opportunity, that can be done in such a short period of time. All the while, they were investing in themselves. They were going to school at night, getting certifications. My mom eventually became a certified nurse assistant, a CNA, where she currently still works. I mean, 20 plus years running, and working with the elderly. My dad would go to school at night, eventually earning his associate's degree. Then he earned his bachelor's degree. And now he's an educator, has been for a long time, at a high school in Naples, Florida. And in the same lifetime, they got to see one of their sons not only also graduate from college, but he graduated from law school, served as an assistant state attorney, went on to be appointed by a Governor DeSantis, to serve on the Judicial Nominating Commission, where I helped a governor select judges. And then they found themselves just 2 years ago on the House floor, in the chamber of the Florida House of Representatives, seeing that same son take the oath of office to represent the people of House District 59 in the Florida legislature. I mean, where else can this thing happen, right? There's not a lot of places in this world where that trajectory can happen in such a short period of time, in one lifetime. And it's a testament to how great our country is. And growing up, and I didn't realize it at first, seeing those examples along the way as a child, having an initial interest in history and eventually politics, I didn't know firmly where I stood on the political spectrum. But I think those experiences informed me to be more conservative minded, because I saw my parents, they were very kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps people, right? They weren't making excuses. They weren't saying, woe is me. They didn't tell my brothers and I that we were victims. They didn't say we were downtrodden. They were saying, this is America's a land of opportunity. Just keep your head down and do the right things. Respect the laws. Work hard. Do all those things, and you can achieve. And so it came to be when I was in high school, I would always debate. This was AP American History. I would always debate with my teacher, Coach Garvey. He was also a coach on the football team. And we would go back and forth. And he was a man of the left. And I would always somehow take the position of the conservatives. I didn't know I was doing it. I just thought it made more sense. And he would always say, okay, here he goes again, Bernie the Republican, Bernie the conservative. And you know what? This was in 11th grade. And I said, if this is what they believe, then so be it. And I never looked back. And here I am today as a conservative activist, fighting the good fight.
Yeah. And so you and I completely disagree on politics.
And we would have those disagreements as kids.
Yeah, we had a lot of arguments. But one of the things I've always believed is that even if someone does not believe what I believe, I can still respect them and I can still listen to them. So back to this freedom of speech thing, Frederick Douglass had a quote that said, "Liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. Liberty is meaningless if you cannot freely express what you believe." And in these times, we have more ways than ever to exercise those freedoms on social media, through protesting, through our words, through our interactions, and our actions. But the reality is, there are many times when someone does not agree with someone else, they are quick to cancel them. So, Bernie, how important is it for us to defend the rights of others to share their convictions, even if we don't agree with them?
Well, again, it's as I was mentioning earlier, it's essential to what the founders intended when they came up with our Constitution, and they had a strong recognition of this. It's important because you cannot have a free and open society if not everyone has a right to say what they want to say and to express their selves and their beliefs and so forth. So to me, I mean, regardless of the viewpoint, it should all be welcome in what we call the marketplace of ideas, right? And we duke it out there. I say what I believe, you say what I believe. There might be an innocent third party bystander, a bystander just kind of there, and just listen to the argument, and they might choose to go my way, they might choose to go your way, but that person, that third party who may want to know what to believe and what to adopt, may never get the benefit of making an informed decision if one viewpoint is completely blocked out, right? So it's important for the public at large to hear all sorts of viewpoints and then to come to an informed decision on their own. And that's especially important for youth, right? People coming up through school, we're learning different things, we're being exposed to new ideas. But if you're only being exposed to certain ideas, it does that young person a disservice as they are growing up in our society, as they're maturing to become citizens in a free society. You don't want a one-sided type of person going in, never had been exposed to what someone else had believed just because they were shut out, right? And so it's essential. It's completely essential to a free society that we defend that right.
Yeah. So even though Americans are generally not as ideologically polarized as we believe ourselves to be, we are often emotionally polarized. So the reality is there are lots of people who don't necessarily like their party that much, but they hate the party that opposes them that much more. Like, there are so many people, they're not really sure about what their party ultimately believes, but if they find out you're a part of the other party, oh my goodness, you get all of their wrath. So Bernie, what do you think about politics as an identity, and how does that play into political polarization?
Well, look, I'm obviously in politics. I serve in public office. I am a strong believer, in the Republican Party, as it's the party that represents conservative viewpoints. And so to me, it very much is a part of my identity. And the reason being, for me, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I had an interest in politics early on, just as a kid, right? So started with a love for American history, and then just started getting curious about politics starting in middle school. So to me, I mean, it's something I'm very passionate about. But for others, politics, they may not be in politics. Politics is a reflection of their values as well, right? So it's an expression of your values, and you express that in the political process on how you want your leaders to legislate, on how you want them to execute on certain policies based on things you fundamentally believe. So I can never fault somebody for, quote unquote, having it to be part of your identity, right? Because it's very meaningful to a lot of people. There are a lot of deep, strong issues that can only be manifested through the political process. And there's other societies they don't have that outlet, right? There is no political process to make society in a way that's more conducive to your values and your beliefs. And so I will never fault somebody for that. But what I would say is, it doesn't have to be just because somebody disagrees, right? That all of a sudden, you're eliminating them from being part of that conversation, right? So that's where the distinction has to be. I mean, I have no issue with somebody being staunch on anything, and fight the good fight. I'll do likewise. But I would hope that my right to do likewise is respected, just like yours is. And so just like somebody else's is, there's a whole host of ideas that can be brought into the public square into the marketplace of ideas where we can get the best product.
Yeah. And the reality is, Bernie, sometimes we're so locked into our political identities. It doesn't matter who the candidate is, doesn't matter what information is coming out, what condition our party is in. Nobody can change our minds. I mean, we are locked into our convictions. And so it's important for us to at least have the intellectual humility to listen to others, even if they don't agree with us. And so since we've hit our 30-minute mark, I want to announce to everyone online on the different platforms to be sure to submit your questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please submit your questions at the bottom of the screen. Hit the QA button and put in your question. We'll address it later in about 30 minutes. So we've talked about how to disagree as fellow Americans, as frenemies. So now we're going to actually move on to some disagreements. And the first issue we're going to talk about is the issue of immigration. What is your take on immigration? What is your stance, my friend?
Look, the state of our country right now is very much, focused on this issue of immigration. And my views is simply this: there's a right way and there's a wrong way, right? And even so, illegal is wrong. There should be the amount of illegal immigrants should always be zero. I talked about my story. We came to this country legally. We came in through a port of entry, the Miami International Airport. We made ourselves known. We applied accordingly to the correct things that would qualify us to stay in the country. Eventually was granted permanent residency, and then we worked towards citizenship. And when I took that oath of citizenship, that was one of actually the proudest days of my life, because as a kid, I wanted nothing more than to just be an American, because I knew this place was just special. And so I have that deep appreciation knowing that, this country offered so much. And this country, again, they didn't owe us anything, offered us so much to be able to contribute, to make the most of ourselves, things that we wouldn't be able to do had we stayed, where we came from. And so to me, that has to be upheld. And even when there is a right way, to do it, it can't be just open up the floodgates, right? So there has to be some limitations on who you're letting in, how can they self-support themselves, what kind of contributions will they make. So it can't just be, oh, well, you have a desire to be here, you come in, and because at the end of the day, a country is first and foremost responsible for their own citizens. And so no one who isn't born here has a right to necessarily be here. And so it's that kind of humility I wish a lot of folks can have when they approach the immigration issue, is that there's no entitlement to be, in America, let alone living in America, right? That's why we have things like visas and passports and so forth. And so there has to be that respect for the country. And so that's my take on the matter. I mean, we have to be strong on the border. It can't be open. And we have to vet extremely who we're even letting in through the legal process as well, that they are coming here to contribute, to be part of this great country and make it better.
Well, my perspective on immigration is that our country is a nation of immigrants. And so the air we breathe, the soil we stand on, it isn't truly American. It became American. And so it takes a great deal of audacity to claim that migrants don't have the right to immigrate to this nation. Remember the first individuals who fled to America seeking religious freedom. To the words that are printed on the Statue of Liberty today, our reputation as a land of refuge for the persecuted is something that defines America and makes it what it is. So closing our doors to refugees would reflect a flagrant disregard for the legacy of what makes us America in the first place. I believe that immigrants add a great level of diversity, variety, and their contributions to our society are unparalleled. They add so much value. They are hard workers. They are honest people. I'm not saying that everyone's perfect, but the labels that are oftentimes thrown at immigrants are not true. If you ask the residents, the entrepreneurs in Springfield, Ohio, they will tell you their Haitian immigrant employees are the best workers they have, and they make a difference. And so we must always remember that immigrants add $2 trillion to our economy. They make a difference, and we need them. I believe they're an asset to our country and not a liability. And so I don't see them as a threat. I see them as people who belong to us. And I understand the idea of not allowing everyone to come into your house. But the reality is, this house did not start out as ours. We took it and it became ours. And so we have to have that humility to acknowledge that a lot of the political rhetoric that goes around immigration is oftentimes gaslighting and creating a issue or agenda or narrative that is not necessarily true, which was evident in the most recent presidential debate. And so I believe that immigrants are a special part of our country. They matter. I pay close attention to what God says about something. So how God talks about immigrants, that ought to be something that we remember, that God values them as humans, and we should treat them as humans and not dehumanize or disrespect them just because they come from a different place. So that's
But
where I stand on immigration. Go ahead, Bernie.
yeah, look, no one's telling anybody to dehumanize anyone, right? But to, espouse the viewpoint that they have a right to be in America, that an immigrant has a right to be here is totally false. And to compare it to the initial settlers, right? These people who settled this land, seeking religious freedom. It wasn't a country, right? They settled here and then they formed a country, the United States of America. Every country has a right to control their borders and to decide who comes in and out. And I'm glad you brought up the point of into our house, right? And that's a great analogy because I think a lot of people who have a philosophical agreement with, say, open borders or mass migration wouldn't apply the same beliefs in their own house, right? So if it's not good for you in your individual life, and why would it be good for a nation? Here's an example. So say, in a hypothetical, there's a family, mom, dad, 3 kids, and there's a large number of people who are in need, and that home has provisions. I mean, does that family not have the right to vet who they're going to let into and live in that home? And they have to vet for a number of reasons, right? We all would vet who we would allow to live with us, to be roommates with us, right? We would want to know what kind of backgrounds they have. Will they cause us harm? Will they be able to contribute to maybe to the rent, maybe to the light bill or something? And is there enough resources to go around? And so if we did the same thing that our country is doing, I mean, it certainly would cause issues in our own home, right? You bring in some people in who you don't know their full backgrounds, and maybe they're going to cause harm to a family member. Maybe there's not enough resources to go around, but then you're giving them extra resources. You're giving them an allowance, and your kid is now getting less allowance. Your kid's getting less snacks because you're giving it to this person that you're helping, all these people, and you didn't have the capacity to do it. That's going to cause some resentment, right, to the people you're first responsible for, which is your family members. And that's what countries are. That's what nations are. Nations aren't just, land masses. They're a collection of people who expect their government to put them first. And so if you have a situation with mass migration, it doesn't matter where they're from. And then there's a lot of them, and then it's causing actual American citizens to get the short end of the stick. Is the same analogy as if we opened up our homes to people that we can't even fully take care of, but then we give them more than the people we are responsible for. That is going to cause resentment and division, and rightfully so. And so that is what we need to understand when we talk about, it has to be very much vetted. It can't be anything illegal, because in a legal situation at that, And that example would be somebody just coming through the window, not even telling you they want to come in. I'm just talking about the even just the legal process. You still have to do extreme vetting, and none of them had a right to be in your home initially. So if you let them in, it makes perfect sense to say, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to work, you're going to contribute to the light bill, you're going to contribute, to the groceries and so forth. And here's an X amount of time when you have to stand on your own 2 feet to go off on your own. But to let everybody in, especially when you have other people to take care of, no one would do that in their own individual lives. So why should a nation do that on a national perspective?
Well, I hear your point, Bernie, but I believe that there's enough room in the American House and resources to accommodate those who are looking for a better life, those who are seeking asylum, seeking refuge from their current conditions wherever they call home. So I don't subscribe to the idea that immigrants take away from us. Immigrants add to us. They don't take away from us. And so the idea that we have less because they are here, I don't subscribe to that notion. But I do hear what you're saying, Bernie. And I do not hope that everyone here, allows just anybody to come into their own personal house. But when it comes to America, we are a nation of immigrants, and we have laws that are in place to deal with those who are seeking asylum from their homes to find a better life here in America.
Well, look,
So,
yeah, we can't overgeneralize that as well. Not every immigrant here is adding, right? So I follow a Twitter page, formerly known as Twitter. It's X now. I believe it's migrant crime. And there are situations where you have illegal aliens committing crimes here in our nation. And the tragedy of that, and as former prosecutor, this is an area that I'm very passionate about, public safety. The tragedy of something like that occurring is that it adds insult to injury, because for the victims, and I happen to serve with one of these victims, an angel mom, Representative Michael. She lost her son to an illegal alien who broke our traffic laws, and now she's without her son. But the agony of that is that it's a preventable death, because had we done our job, that person wouldn't have been in the country in the first place, right? Had we been serious about our borders and vetting these people, if they're illegal, shouldn't have been in here in the first place. So I get all sorts of people commit crimes, but there's something extra upsetting to know, wait, that person wasn't even supposed to be here, but because of our broken immigration laws and our broken border, they were allowed to be in, and now we're losing our own citizens. That's happening on a weekly basis, and I encourage you to follow that page. So to just completely generalize that every immigrant adds and doesn't subtract, I think is wrong. That's why vetting is extremely important, because any kind of immigration, first and foremost, the purpose has to be, I think, to benefit the host country. And if there's not an addition, like you're talking about, to our host, to our country as citizens, then I don't see what would be a priority, right? And it's good. Sometimes it works well for the immigrant themselves. But every nation has to look out for their own interests. I don't fault any of the other countries in the world to look out for their own citizens. That's who we take the oath for, right? As an elected official, I take the oath for my constituents, Americans, and we have to advance the interests of our own constituents over those who aren't. I mean, and that's just a fact of life. And so the vetting has to be very important to know who's coming in, whether they will be adding, and the illegal has to be completely zeroed out, because we don't want people committing harm when they shouldn't have been here in the first place.
All right. So we'll disagree on that topic, but we got to go to the next one, Bernie. The next topic is the Second Amendment and gun control. So what is your take on the Second Amendment and gun rights?
Well, we opened up our conversation talking about freedom of speech, which is, of course, in the First Amendment. And right after the First Amendment, we have the Second Amendment, all right, which is our right, our individual right to keep and bear arms, something that the founders definitely saw as essential to preserving liberty. In fact, we would not have a United States of America, this great land where everybody wants to come to, if it wasn't for individual private citizens that were well armed to be able to take on the British, the powerful British. And so it's essential to liberty. It's essential to preserving our rights against tyranny, and it's very important to public safety, right? So it's I'm a law and order guy. I believe in law enforcement, but sometimes if you're calling, the response may be a little delayed, right? And if you are well armed, you can be able to defend you and your family immediately as law enforcement is on the way. So we should never disarm people and make it seem like somehow exercising your Second Amendment rights, which is again, and one of the inalienable rights that is endowed to us by our Creator. It is wrong to disarm people and to make them feel ashamed to be exercising such an essential right that actually gave birth to this great nation of ours.
Yeah. So I want to start off by reading this statement from 1791. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so an individual had rights to carry and use arms for self-defense, and it was envisioned by the framers of the Constitution to have a check in power. Think about it. The Second Amendment provides people with the last coup de grace that would enable the states to thwart and oppose the general government. So basically, it makes every citizen a soldier and every soldier a citizen. I'll say that one more time. The Second Amendment makes every citizen a soldier and every soldier a citizen. Like most rights, I don't believe that you can have a right without a responsibility. And so a lot of folks believe that the Second Amendment means that you can have limitless weapons, whatever you want to do. It's your right. It should be your practice. But I think that regulation, there's a place for regulation even within gun rights. I think controls are necessary for societies to exist and thrive. We're a nation of laws. And I think that if we were to regulate gun usage and laws more, we could perhaps see less mass shootings, less school shootings, less shootings in the public square. Because the reality is AR-15s and assault weapons, they should have no place in the civilians' gun cabinetry. That's my opinion. I hear what the Second Amendment says, but I believe that you can still have amendment rights with regulation. These assault rifles can do lots of damage in a little amount of time with minimum effort. I think they cause so much harm. They have continually wreaked havoc in our schools, churches, in the public square. And I don't think that, let's say if someone has a gun, assault rifle, they enjoy using it for sport or as a hobby. I get it. But to me personally, it boils down to preference versus purpose. Like, what's more important? Everyone having the right to have whatever they want to have, or us preserving lives and ensuring that we at least have some safeguards so that the most lethal of all weapons can at least be regulated and not allowed in everyone's cabinetry. So that's where I stand. I believe that there's a place for these amendment rights to be upheld even while they're being regulated.
Well, my friend, we disagree. So the AR-15 is the most popular rifle used by Americans across the land, law-abiding Americans, I might add. And so when you disarm these law-abiding Americans, it doesn't help anything, right? And so I've heard a great quote that if you outlaw guns, only the outlaws will have guns. And what that means is gun control really puts law-abiding people at a disadvantage. The criminals, the crooks, the people who are out to do evil are not going to care about your laws. That's why they're criminals. And so why should we put law-abiding Americans at a disadvantage to exercise a right that is enshrined in our Bill of Rights, in our US Constitution, when the madman down the street, the criminal down the street will still be armed to be able to harm you. You should be able to protect your family and yourself with the same level of firepower as intended by the founding fathers. And I will point to the fact that the notion that gun control will make us safer is has been proven to be incorrect, right? Because if that were the case, the city of Chicago, which has some of the most stringent gun control rules, in fact, all the way to the fact where they have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court to determine things that are coming out of Chicago because they clamp down on an individual's rights to keep and bear arms. But yet Chicago is one of the most dangerous cities when it comes to gun violence. Why is that? It just goes to show you it's not about the gun. It's about the depraved individual that would use a gun to commit harm. And so, this notion that we have to control and disarm is wrong. It puts law-abiding people at a disadvantage. And the people like the ones in Chicago, where there are strong gun laws, will continue to harm us, and we will have no defense. To me, we cannot go down that route.
All right, Bernie, we got to move along. So let's talk about the presidential election. So it took less than an hour after Joe Biden's decision to step aside for the Democrats to rally around Kamala Harris as their party's presidential nominee. What are your thoughts right now as to where we are and where we're headed?
Well, it's important, to see the example that you noted, that, a party that says, democracy is on the line, democracy this, democracy that, did a very non-democratic thing by removing, pressuring the guy out who actually got the delegates through a democratic process, and then exalted VP Harris, who no one voted for, to be the nominee. So it's a little rich to hear some of the campaign spin about, they're for democracy. So the state of the race is going to be interesting. It's going to come down to the wire, I think, with if President Biden had remained the nominee, I think this would be in the bag a long time ago. And so there's a reason why they pushed him out, right? The record of success is very lacking, in my opinion. And it was going to show, on the campaign trail. And so actions were taken to remove him. And I'm still confident in our nominee, Donald J. Trump, to be victorious. He's got a proven record of success in his 4 years as president. And when you compare it to what has happened under the Biden-Harris administration, so everything that's happening now can be associated with her, right? She's part of the administration. She's talking about lowering cost of living, doing this and that. She's currently in office. She can do these things now. And so I truly believe the American people, as long as all sides have to be heard, free exchange of ideas, debates, rallies, and so forth, everybody should be able to pitch to the voters their idea and their vision. And I think when the American voters, those swing voters, hear those competing visions that are allowed to be in this public square, this marketplace of ideas, I think they will go towards the direction of Donald J. Trump.
Okay. Well, I just want to state that Kamala Harris, aspires to be the first woman to hold the country's top office. And her campaign has re-energized the liberal voters and has galvanized over $671 million in donations over the past 2 months. And so she has already made history throughout her career, and she is on the brink of making history. But let's break down how presidential elections are won. Is it only about the votes? What role does the Electoral College play in the election?
Well, it's both, right? Because the votes reflect who the electors, as part of the Electoral College, will be. So in essence, when you're voting, you're voting for a slate of electors. So if you're voting for Donald Trump, you're voting for a slate of electors that have pledged to Donald J. Trump. If you're voting for Kamala Harris, you're voting for a slate of delegates and electors that are going to be voting for Harris. And so, of course, it gets a little more nuanced than that, but those agreements are pretty much binding. And so even though it's not technically a direct election, you're voting for the electors that will elect the candidates of your choice. And so it's still important to get out there, to make your voice heard, to cast those ballots, and because the people who will be going in their respective states to cast the official ballot for president will reflect the people that you voted for.
Yeah. So the election is uh, several weeks away, and just recently we saw another headline that stopped all of us in our tracks to see that a presidential candidate was there was an attempt to commit harm to Donald Trump on his own golf course. And a lot of folks are, jumping to conclusions and saying this is the reason why that happened. But the reality is, when things happen, it seems like the things that should unify us are creating even more division because of the level of polarization. Now, I heard President Biden say, in America, we resolve our differences peacefully at the ballot box and not at the end of a gun, because violence solves nothing. It just does damage. And so we must do everything we can to prevent it and never give it any oxygen. And so I was shocked to see that. But the reality is that there are people who feel so passionately about what they believe that they are willing to commit harm to presidential candidates and even presidents. This is not new to us. We've seen this in the past. 4 presidents have been killed while in office. But what is your take on what happened this week in Florida?
Well, there's no place for it, right? There's no place for the political violence. It's what we see on a consistent basis in other countries overseas. And as you mentioned, we've seen it in our nation's history as well when it comes to, people who have been president. Now, the rhetoric, that some can attribute to this, should not be overlooked as well, right? I made the reference earlier that the Biden-Harris administration, their campaigns talk a lot about democracy, but when you say things like Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, or we got to put him in the bullseye, and those type of things, I mean, those type of charged words, don't help the situation, certainly, right? When it comes to having a productive dialogue, because there are deranged individuals who will believe that Donald Trump is somehow going to be some kind of dictator and roll over all of your rights and so forth. And if he's as evil as some people are saying he is, it doesn't take that much of a level of derangement to take matters into your own hands in the extreme ways that we've seen. So what occurred just recently is only it's the second assassination attempt, right? So let's not forget what happened a couple months ago in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the president was actually hit, right? A close call, just a slight tilt of the head. President Trump was hit, and then now we had a situation where he potentially could have been hit once again. So it's a very scary time, for our country. This type of thing should not be occurring. There has to be, again, that's what the First Amendment is for, right? We exchange our ideas through our words. We make our voices heard even through our votes. But to start trying to assassinate one another is totally uncalled for. And I hope we see the end of this for some time to come, and that we can just get back to engaging on the ideas and not having to think you have to dodge a bullet just for putting yourself forward for office.
Yeah, and I know that the Secret Service will also do its investigation and see what they can do. But the reality is, regardless of what you believe and which political side you find yourself on, you should never allow your anger or emotions to lead you to the place to commit harm to somebody else because they don't believe like you. I think that there also is a mental health crisis in our country that we have not even talked about, but I'm not saying that's the reason for it. But the reality is there is a level of anxiety, a level of anger, a level of polarization that people feel like if we don't get things in check, we may be on the brink of another civil war. Do you believe so, Bernie? Are things that bad that we might have to worry about heading towards another civil war in our own country?
Well, I certainly hope this is not the case and that it's not where we're headed. Certainly, it's not academic, it's not theoretical. That has happened before, in this country, right? So we know there's a we're capable of engaging in a civil war because it's been done before. So that shouldn't be taken lightly, and that's why allowing the free exchange of ideas avoids those type of things. That's why making sure that every citizen in this greatest country on God's green earth knows that their viewpoints matter, that there's value and how they express themselves politically. Because if they don't feel there's an outlet, right? If folks feel like their backs are up against the wall, that I'm just shut out, you become marginalized, and you're like, no one's listening to my viewpoints. My candidates are getting censored either through big tech or the powers that be. It can make people feel very upset and angry. I'm not saying it's going to come to the point of a civil war, but it doesn't help, right? That level of agitation will rise and people feel they can't freely communicate when they disagree, and us giving them the grace of allowing them to disagree in the public square. You don't have to take it. You don't have to agree, but let people express themselves and have a free exchange of ideas in every sector of our society.
Well, we're going to bring back out Liz Joyner from the Village Square to facilitate our Q&A because a lot of folks have been asking questions, and we look forward to engaging with you all. Thank you for hanging around with us.
Every time I get to hang out with the two of you, I remember why I want you to meet every single American, and then we'll be good, right? You just have to go on a national tour, meet all 330 million of them, hang out with them a little while. So I've got this theory of the case, and I'm curious if you agree with me, and then I'll turn to some audience questions. We've got a lot of great ones. I think that when I started doing this work to build bridges across division, I think I thought it was about finding agreement on policy. And I revised my opinion somewhere along the way. And I started to believe that really it was more about sort of being willing to keep talking, because that's how you see like all sides of really big issues, right? Because if you're not having the conversation, you've just got a slice of it. But then also that it's really more about how you come to see the people you're engaged with differently. Has that been your experience I know that you've always known each other, but do y'all agree with my theory or disagree?
Yeah, I think you're right. And the relationship that Justin and I have, childhood friends, grew up in the same church. And so it helped to have that existing relationship and knowing just as children, we would have these kind of debates and conversations that he's coming at it from a good faith place, right? So that familiarity, we're genuine friends, that helps foster that conversation. And even though, our minds aren't being changed necessarily, I can respect, where he's coming from because I know he's operating in good faith. And so I think what you're doing here is very important because even if people don't come to agree, they can at least know where somebody is coming from, and be more understanding. And so I think you're right. That's been my experience and just having open dialogue. And I know I'm different because I'm very, like I said, since I was a kid, I've been interested in politics and read a lot on it and so forth. So I'm pretty entrenched in my views, right? And so, but what I gain and what I value is that I do learn things, from these conversations. But that being said, don't discount the fact that there are some people who aren't really sure where they stand. And so they might be able to be persuaded one way or another just by listening to conversations or engaging in them. And we have to be able to allow them to genuinely engage and not feel afraid that they're just going to be dismissed if they express something that might be deemed unpopular, right? It does a disservice to them because they might have come around and agreed to your position, but they just wanted to give their 2 cents. But if people feel like they're going to be shut out, that's never going to happen. And there might never be any kind of agreement, or at the very least, know where somebody is coming from.
So that's, it's interesting that I think I didn't completely understand. My politics are center left. And I think before I started, I didn't understand how difficult we've made it for conservatives to be part of the conversation in the public square. And so sometimes I think that my biggest job is to make sure that that people feel welcome, that they feel like they won't be um they're welcome with all the things they bring, including like we started early with our God Squad. Yes, you can bring your faith into the public square. And I have a lot of empathy now for how it feels, kind of looking at the conversations through the eyes of conservatives. And I think it's part of what's brought us to where we are, which means that I want as many conservatives in the public square as possible.
Yeah,
Justin,
and I think it's important for people to be willing and open to be stretched and to get out of your comfort zone because you need patience to do this work, to engage with the other side. You need patience, intellectual humility, and a willingness to listen. And so, yes, lean into those opportunities. Don't run away.
Um, so questions, I love this. So I've got a two-part question from two audience members. Part one is from Anthony. When did you all first realize you had very different points of view? So like I want to hear about, the 8-year-old Bernie and Geston conversation. And then from Diane, did your family dynamics have anything to do with your abilities to remain friends, even with fundamental disagreements? Were they also people who could see a bigger, deeper picture?
Yeah, so going back to those early conversations, it's very different, right? Because I mean, this was like middle school, so you don't really know, what you're talking about, right? So I mean, you might have an idea, but I mean, you just know you're arguing, and so, but as I mature, I become more sure in what I believe and can provide, more of a basis for why I got to certain conclusions. But I would say when I really realized that is just seeing. So we both, left Naples. We went our different ways. Justin to Oakwood and HBCU in Alabama. I went to another same denomination Christian school over in the Washington D.C. area. And then following each other, staying in touch online, you could tell he had some different beliefs. Right? This is we're different. So you start seeing it more and more. But then we have the existing friendship. We will come back in the summers, hang out, go to the movies, beach, different church group type things. But you could tell as we came into our own, we're becoming more, sure in our beliefs, and it was different. Regarding the family dynamic, yes, I think that helped. Growing up again in the same church, our families, both our parents were involved in the church as well, and so there's a lot of goodwill there. Having that pre-existing relationship that was family based as well.
Yeah, I think that having that level of community has made a difference in our relationship because, you know, when you think about our differences and how much we disagree and how often we disagree, I've just come to the conclusion and realization that no matter how often or how long Bernie is wrong, do you hear me? No matter how long Bernie is wrong, I will never cancel him. There you have it, Bernie. You will always be my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Well, as Bernie gets bigger and bigger jobs in politics, you're going to have to hire him at some point in time, right? He'll be like your.
I don't know. I don't know, Liz. I don't know.
I'm going to be watching.
Oh my gosh.
So is there anything you just can't talk about? Like, have you hit a wall on something that's just like, yeah, we're done?
No, for me, I think there's no untouchable topic, but I do believe that there's a time and place for any topic. So you have to kind of use your wisdom. It's not always the best time to troll Bernie. Like the day that Trump was on his golf course and someone tried to, you know, commit a crime and hurt him. I didn't text Bernie that day and troll him and say, "Oh, what do you think about?" I know Bernie's in shock. I know he's probably, you know, hurting, frustrated, angry. I'm not saying I know what he's going through, but I'm not going to raise certain topics at the wrong time. So I exercise wisdom, but there is no untouchable topic for me, whether it's abortion, whether it's the economy, whether it's the environment. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, faith, anything, any
Yeah.
topic can be talked about, but timing matters.
Because you value the relationship more than anything else, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, we've gotten into some really, sticky topics, even following the summer of unrest of 2020, and the issues of race were coming up, BLM. I know we've touched on it in previous segments when we've done this sort of thing. But I mean, we have very different views on that when it comes to things like systemic racism and so forth. And indeed, it could get pretty charged, right? Because people have experiences that might inform. And so you have to know how to navigate and use discernment and just be, time and place and just know how to approach. But it doesn't mean it's off the table, right? Because we disagree on the state of race, in the country and what needs to be done. So don't avoid the tough topics, but use some tact. I mean, that could go a long way.
Yeah, so you two both know Dr. Jacob Hess, who's my political opposite. We've done a lot of projects together. And I'm a DC native. And so on January 6th, I kind of sat there and watched it and just wept. One person called me all day long, one person, and that was Jacob. And he called me to see if I was okay.
Hmm.
He knew how much this was hurting my heart, and he shared it was hurting his too. And it's like once you have experiences like that with someone, it changes everything, right? Our political differences, which don't really change, mine and Jacob's, are about the 20th most important thing about our relationship. And, I worry we don't have enough relationships like yours and ours. And that's part of what's pulling us apart, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the relationships matter. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that pre-existing relationships certainly, you can go into the conversations much more in a much more comfortable way, knowing, this person cares for me and I care for them. And so I challenge people to just, be friends first, or just even not friends, just get to know somebody on a different level as well. What sports teams do they like? What are their hobbies and so forth? And then you're going to see those commonalities and so forth. And then if you want to have these discussions, you can go into it, but you've already established a foundation, right? That you've leveled with each other on different things that weren't political topics, and you can go into these conversations in a much more easy manner, where it's not like, wow, this guy despises me. I know he doesn't despise me because we went and saw a ball game together. We're in the same fantasy football league. We chat. We send memes, together. So it's establishing relationship is key. I know it's not always possible. It's a very fast paced life a lot of times. But if there can be just that level of, I can see this person in a different light other than their political views, it will help.
Yeah. So if I could summarize that, be a human and not a political robot. Just be a human and let that be the foundation and find your commonalities.
Yeah. So here is a question from Nasheed. Nasheed, Dr. Majuan is the executive director of Florida Humanities, so our partner. So it's a good question, and I know you'll have a good answer. In what ways can friendship, with its blend of common ground and stark differences, provide insights into bridging the political and social divides that challenge American society today?
I think friendship is important because of the example that a relationship can set in a society. For example, people learn by what they are taught, and they also learn by what's caught. So someone can observe the relationship I have with Bernie and realize, you know what, they may not agree on a lot, if not almost anything, but it is possible to maintain a friendship with someone who believes differently than me. So being exposed to the possibility of not always canceling somebody because they're different can be a game changer for someone else. So the example that you set through your relationship and friendship, just like the example that I set with my family, how I deal with my wife and how I relate to her, sets an example to my daughter. Even though she's 3, she is learning from how I'm treating my wife. And so the same goes for the relationship with Bernie and how others see us. And so I aspire for our relationship to be a positive example in this dark political world.
Ditto.
So I wonder if, oh, I know. A question from Julie. Was there a defining moment in your relationship? If so, what? One that you can talk about.
Uh,
Defining moment.
well, for me, we've been doing this. Liz, you mentioned this in your intro earlier about all the different schools we've been to, everywhere from Berkeley to BYU, and doing this sort of engagement uh, with folks in academia and the community at large. I mean, that was a defining moment because Geston reached out to me about this idea. He's the one that pitched it and said, "Hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for us to basically go on the road and do this." And to me, that was very defining because it showed, I knew he valued me as a friend, but he valued me enough to like put my views out there, right? I mean, this is an accomplished guy, who's been on national television, met a president, and has done a lot of things. He could have had audiences without me being present, right? He was living out in the Oakland area. He could have spoke at Berkeley without me ever being next to him. But the fact that he would invite me to engage in this journey, now my voice was able to be heard on Berkeley's campus, and he's given me also the opportunity to be heard and to highlight my views. And sometimes these students have not heard a perspective like mine. And so the fact that Geston, who vehemently disagrees with me, would allow me to come with him and allow people to hear about views that he vehemently disagrees with, it's a testament to who he is. And it was definitely a defining moment in our friendship. Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I could piggyback on that, I think that was a full circle moment when I had the opportunity to connect with Liz through a friend, Kyle. And when they asked the question, do you have a friend that you disagree with politically, but you have a relationship with? I couldn't have thought of a better person than Bernie. And I was honored that he would even consider doing it because I know how busy he was. He was just starting out on the campaign trail many years ago, and lots of things going on. And so I felt honored in the same way that you felt honored that we could literally take our private conversations public on the road and to do it on a college campus. And sometimes I have the home court advantage because the campus is extremely liberal. Sometimes he has the home court advantage because the campus is predominantly conservative. But at the end of the day, we go in there together as friends and we walk out the room as friends. And to me, that's a W.
Wow, it gives me great honor. I feel like that's my mic drop moment. I can retire now that I had some little part in your defining moment. So it's pretty great. So I wanted to ask you about sort of watching the tragedy, both coming from families of refugees from Haiti and watching the tragedy there, as well as sort of how it intersects with our lives. Are there kind of perspectives that you all have that you share that you don't share that might be different than what, non-Haitian Americans experience?
Yeah, I'll share this. Haitians have been the recipients of slander for a long time. Folks like to tote they are the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but they don't know about the history of Haiti and Hispaniola. And so Columbus landed on the island of Hispaniola in 1492, and he found this place. And later on, they ended up, wiping out the people and bringing slaves from West Africa to that place where there was lots of sugarcane and crops, and the agriculture was rich, and it produced lots of wealth for France. But Haiti was known as the Pearl of the Antilles, was extremely prosperous at once. And remember, the revolution that happened in Haiti in 1804, when the Haitians stood up and revolted and got their independence as the first Black independent country, that was game changing for the world. And it also led to America expanding its borders eventually through the Louisiana Purchase. And so Haitians have benefited not just America, but the world. But after they got their freedom, remember, the French had them pay an equivalent of 20 to 30 billion dollars of reparations to France. So these were the ones who were enslaved. Now that they're free, France punishes them for their independence, and they had to work to pay that debt off. And it took over a century to pay that debt off. And so how Haiti got to this point is a combination of external exploitation, a combination of internal corruption. But Haitians are a resilient people. They're hard workers. They know how to rise above the rubble, literally and figuratively. And that's why when I hear certain comments about Haitians that are untrue, it hurts my heart. It boils my blood, because I know what Haitians are, what they're about, and how amazing they are. And I'll let my friend Bernie chime in on this topic.
Look, I'm, and obviously, I have a strong background, with the country of Haiti. But, moving here as a young child, I don't pretend to be an expert in Haiti as well. And so, and my focus since growing up in Florida has, like I said, is to be an American. When I took that oath, that's been my focus here. But, I love history, and a lot of things that Geston is saying are accurate insofar that there was a great, history of independence and so forth. It unraveled along the way somehow, and people can point to different reasons why and so forth. But I think a lot of things are way more nuanced than they are. So the fact is, it is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We can't run away from the facts as well, right? There is high illiteracy rate. There is high poverty. There is poor security. I mean, there's a lot of dysfunction, with violence and gangs and so forth. And so you can't just point to the glorious history and neglect the current contemporary conditions as well, those that led up to that point, and completely absolve, the people within Haiti as well, namely the leaders, civil society, and so forth. And so, but again, I'm no expert, and of course, in my elected role, my jurisdiction, my capacity is to look out for Florida's interests and my constituents. So, but reading up on what I've read up on, and talking to family members, it's truly a sad state of affairs over there. But at the same time, again, I don't want to paint a broad brush, right? It's, of course, I don't think I've heard, people who want to do total categorizations, that's kind of foolhardy. But to do it on the other end as well, that everything is great, is also wrong. There are certain good things, there are certain bad things. And when people are conveying that they've seen bad things, it shouldn't be completely dismissed either, just because we share the same heritage. It may end up being true, it may end up not being true. But just because somebody is saying something is occurring with a group of people that share our background, it's not an indictment on everybody who shares that background on a national stage, or certainly us. And so there has to be that level of just deciphering what is actually being pointed out, and seeing if issues can be addressed. In our immigration segment, I stress on this point. Mass migration is something that I am not a fan of, because it can be very disruptive to the people who are currently living in a community. And it has nothing to do with nefarious or xenophobic or just nasty sentiments. Some people, if they live in a certain place and they see a huge number of different types of people, especially in a place that wasn't maybe doing that well, where there's housing shortages and so forth, that is going to cause some angst. I mean, it just is. And so that's why I truly believe in the very narrowly targeted vetting process of allowing people to come in as opposed to broad mass levels of migration. And certainly illegal, even if you're coming from a terrible situation, laws are laws, and there has to be zero of that occurring. And so that's the way I approach it. It's not to say that it lacks compassion or so forth, but every nation has to pursue their interests, and we have to be able to decipher and allow nuance in these conversations.
Yeah, I also want to chime in and share that 12 to 15,000 Haitian immigrants have migrated to Springfield, Ohio over the past few years. And they left their country due to the conditions in Haiti. And they were in search of stability and safety and job opportunities. And many of them have found opportunities working in steel mills, doing other jobs in factories and farming. And they came to the U.S. under the temporary protected status designation. And so they are here. And Bernie, would you say that they are here illegally? Do they need to go back home?
My point is, I mean, technically, because it's a government program, they have legal protections. My point is, I disagree with the policy that allows this to occur because I do not believe, again, in mass migration. And it has nothing to do, it's not an indictment on these people. As you point out, vast majority are doing, productive things. But it's also wrong to dismiss the concerns of people, Americans, mind you, whose country this actually is. It's actually their country, Americans. If they have complaints about a spike in traffic incidents, a spike in teachers being overwhelmed because there's not enough tutors and educators that can work with students that don't speak English, with increased hospital costs and an increased limited supply of housing due to this 20,000 or so Haitian migrants, it's wrong to dismiss these people as well because they are just as much humans as the Haitian migrants, and it's actually their country, their citizens. So they have every right to say, hey, this may be too much. We're being kind of, limited here because of that. It's the same example I gave with the home. None of us would invite a whole bunch of people into our home if we had no capacity to really take care of them. And we don't know, and we have people to take care of are actually family members, and now resources are being taken away, incidents are occurring.
So Bernie, I'm going to jump in. I apologize. I
Right
apologize. We're running out of time, unfortunately. So we're going to have you back and continue the conversation. But, it strikes me, I've got a couple of closing questions for you. And it strikes me that as always, it's kind of both and in a broad, big way. Bernie, you focus on, the things that are right about America and the things we've been able to achieve together. And Geston, in a broad way, you're looking at what we can become. And aren't those both, isn't it both and, right? Don't we, shouldn't the conversation continue because we need to talk about both? And then I've got a question for you. So
yeah, let it all in. I mean, right. That's freedom. That's the free exchange of ideas. Let it all.
All right. So before we close tonight, I wanted to ask our participants if they could click on the link that we're throwing into the chat window with our post-evaluation survey. If you can answer the questions while we're finishing up with the last bit of the program, we'd be eternally grateful. And you'll also have a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So Bernie and Geston, give us some closing comments and thoughts, a charge from you to us and our audience.
So I would say just have meaningful relationships, engage with each other, and don't make somebody feel dismissed just because they have a different viewpoint that may be unpopular and so forth. Allow different voices to be heard. It may change your mind, but that's not even the purpose. Don't even go into it to change the other person's mind either. Go into it to see where they're at least coming from. And a good way to do that is just to ask why. If you hear something that's triggering, quote unquote, just collect yourself and say, why do you believe that? And then if you do that exercise, it will be so insightful as to where people are coming from. and it will be beneficial to all parties concerned, even if you still don't agree with them. But now you know why. You're like, okay, that makes sense. They actually had an experience. That's how they grew up. And you look at them in a different light, and it'll be a positive light.
Yeah, my closing words would be we need to interact with others more because democracy is a contact sport. So sometimes we hide behind keyboards and cell phones and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and we make comments. But I believe democracy should be high tech and high touch. You can use the technology, but you need to interact with other people, especially those who are different than you are. And so you need to get out into your community, whether you are a part of a community garden, whether you play ping pong in a league, or you bowl, or you play basketball. Cultivate relationships with those who are around you, because remember, democracy is a contact sport and it should be high tech and high touch. So stop hiding behind your keyboards and get involved in your community because
Touch some
democracy is at
grass,
stake.
right? Touch some grass, be part of the world. And that's actually one thing I learned from a conservative friend is maybe we should have less that's about politics.
Go play some pickleball.
And anything you want to, any last thoughts or anything that gives you hope that you want to share before we say goodnight?
Well, I just want to thank everybody who tuned in this evening, and thank you, Liz. You're truly doing yeoman's work in regards to this space. And hopefully this can spark additional conversations and additional relationships that will allow us to have an even more thriving nation.
Yeah, one thing that gives me hope is there's currently a female candidate for the president of the United States of America. And so that's hopeful for me. And one of the things that I've noticed is at the last session, there was legislation that was passed that was bipartisan. So it's a reminder that even if it is not broadly broadcasted or highlighted or shared, that there are people working together across the lines, behind the scenes, trying to make our country better for everybody. And that's hopeful to me, that it's not all gloom and doom, that we can work together for the greater good of our nation.
Well, you two gentlemen give me lots of hope. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. On behalf of Florida Humanities and the Village Square and the rest of our streaming partners, we'd like to thank you for joining us. Good night, everyone. Good night, Bernie and Geston.
Take care.
Thank you.